So what is the purpose? And George has set up this beautifully. What are you trying to achieve in your sheep production systems? And I think it's got to be beyond, I'm an 18.5 micron producer who turns a few lambs off or whatever I do. It's about what is the product, what consumer set am I chasing, what product am I trying to produce? Is it and for the blokes in the room, there's other stuff on the slide other than that middle one. So am I trying to produce active outdoor wear for icebreaker or for your smart wool socks? Or am I trying to produce suiting? Am I trying to produce a great carpet, or is it a great meat product that I'm chasing? And they're all the brands that we supply and many more in New Zealand Merino. But my job there is very much to design the sheep to meet that market need. And what are those consumers wanting? And this is where George has really covered off nicely. But we're seeing these great trends or strong trends in. Consumers want to have attributes in the products they're buying. They don't just want to get something because it's cheap. They want to, more and more, they're asking for attributes in that product. So they want to know that it's come from an animal welfare, sustainable background, that its production hasn't somehow degraded the environment, and they want it to be safe. They want a whole heap of attributes that we haven't previously had to think that much about, probably. And I think the key one they want is transparency. So I think in future you have to think about farming as being farming with a GoPro on your head, because essentially consumers more and more are expecting to have very transparent supply chains and be able to get on your farm and be happy with what they see every day of the year. And so that sort of provides some challenges. And I guess we can say that, oh, that's okay, we can leave our food companies and other people to worry about that, and they can make sure that we've got that covered. But when you ask the consumer sets where they expect the responsibility for that transparency to come from, many of them are saying, we expect farmers to deliver some of that. So that's where we expect a lot of these, the positive attributes, we expect the responsibility for those positive attributes lies in the hands of farmers. So we can't just sit on our hands and expect someone else to worry about it. We have to think about these things as well, in terms of animal welfare, food safety, human rights in our supply chains, environmental impact, the whole gamut. So that's a bit of a rev up, I suppose. But now getting back onto what we can do on farm to sort of meet that set and how we can build our productivity and make sure we are in that top 20% that John would like us to be, because we all can't have it, so we're just going to have to deal with what we've got. And when we think about our production systems, we need to think about, okay, what do I want to do? What is my country suited towards? What is my own abilities suited? So I might be a cropper who runs a few sheep, so there's no point having a really intensive sheep production system on my farm because I know that my emphasis and my effort is going into my crop system. So having a really good think in your business about what the production system I'm willing to run these sheep into. So that's really important in terms of designing a sheep to be fit for purpose. It has to be fit for purpose for you and fit for purpose for a consumer set. So it's getting that balance right is really, really important, because there's one thing that's very, very certain, and that is there's not one size fits all in terms of sheep breeding. There's different sheep types for different farms and the different sheep types for different consumer sets. And I think this guy, Mike Goddard, who actually lectured me at University of Melbourne, sums it up beautifully in this statement in terms of what we are doing as sheep breeders. And so the particular task is your particular task, your consumer set and your own production system. And then what do we do? How do we go about our gene hunt to assemble the ideal genotype to do that job? And that's essentially what we're trying to do. And I think that's a really, in my head, really the appropriate way to look at it. And I think it's important at this juncture to really hone in on what we are doing when we're buying rams, because every year we go out, our gene hunt annually is bringing in bags of genes, and so we bring some mobile delivery systems for those bags of genes, but that's essentially what we're doing. So it's no point buying rams that we can take pictures of and put on our mantelpieces. We have to think of that job as bringing those genes in that are going to do your particular task as good as possible. So it's not about what we get on the back of the ute at the end of the day, how many beers we might sneak out of our stud breeder. It's about what are those genes we're bringing home and how good are they? Are they exactly what we need to drive our productivity and drive our product to be as good as it can be? So in terms of working out, so once we've got that clear in our head, we know exactly what we're going to produce and we know what we're willing to do on our farm in terms of a production system. We then go about deciding which traits you're going to put in your breeding objective. Which traits are the important drivers for you to be able to deliver on those two promises? And so I've ordered these in what I think the appropriate way they should be ordered. You might have a different opinion about where they sit. But in terms of traits that you should think of putting in your selection decisions, one first on the list is attribute of value that can be captured in your supply chain. So what is something that's valuable to your consumers that they're willing to pay for, and that money flows back into your pocket through the supply chain that you supply into. And I'm going to cover off each of these in more detail, so I won't go into them now. But increasing per hectare production, that's obvious. That's what we do as farmers. That's what we're striving to achieve. Increasing labour use efficiency is really important in our production systems. Labour's not getting any cheaper, and that the under 30s that John was talking about aren't going to do it for passion, aren't going to sit out there and slog away for hours and hours doing the jobs that I'm maybe one of those under 30s or wish to be, that older generations were willing to do. Those things are changing. So having labour use efficiency is really important. Obviously, reducing the cost of production is one way to achieve a great outcome, and that's a focus of what we do. I think traits that allow transparency, and I'll go into this in a bit more detail, that's going to be important going forward. It may not have been on our radar before or that clearly, but it's getting stronger. And then last on my list is an attribute of value that can't be captured in our current supply chain, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail as well. So that's a value that a consumer is willing to take and really happy with, but there's no value capture mechanism in your supply chain to actually bring that back to dollars on your farm. So attributes of value are pretty obvious in terms of wool, so something like staple strength, fibre diameter that George has just talked about. So those things are attributes of value that can be captured in your supply chain, and that differs between years, and style is one of them that in particular categories that can be strong, but essentially they are things worthy of going into your breeding objective because they are valuable attributes and they are captured in your auction system. And obviously in lamb, carcass weight and GR fat depth are important, and they are rewarded in supply chains, and so focusing on getting the right carcass in specs is important. So I'm going to put up a heap of graphs now just to try and put the last few people to sleep. But each of these graphs, and I just want to go through this one in a bit more detail just so we know what we're talking about. So each of those dots is a group of progeny from a single sire, and that's from our central progeny test in New Zealand. There's a couple of different breeds, and interestingly in Kiwi, Kiwi's called a 75% merino quarter bred. Don't know how that works, but that's what it's called. So essentially a Polworth or a sort of a comeback type. Corridor merino, but mostly merino sheep in that progeny test. And so each of those dots is a single progeny group from a sire, and they've all been running in the same paddock from birth. So everything you see on these graphs is genetic difference. So everything else has been taken out of the equation. And I guess just in this one, in terms of an attribute of value, staple strength is often something we think of as determined by the season or by our management. We drop the ball for a week and we put a break in our staple. But it has a massive genetic component as well, and so having genetics that deliver you staple strength year on, year out, higher than they would otherwise is really, really important, particularly if that's a trait. Particularly as you go into higher suiting type markets and stuff, you get really, really negative impacts on your price through low staple strength. The other thing that's important on that graph is the correlation with coefficient of variation, and we've known that for a long time. But something that's great about low CV wool, we all like low CV wool, we like low CVs, but it also delivers higher staple strength and a whole raft of other positive attributes. So something that may not be in your breeding objective, but worth considering. Obviously, now moving on to increasing per hectare production, obviously number of lambs weaned is something that a lot of us focus on. Reproduction's been a big focus of a drive across our industry for a long time. So these are those same progeny groups, and this is their two-tooth, so their maiden joining, and this is their scanning outcome. And so what you can see there is the worst sire group. So these are all daughters of single sires on each of those dots, running in the same paddock since birth. So the worst sire group delivered 68% scanning, and the best sire group delivered 128% scanning. And if all the people in the room can obviously get that's a massive opportunity. If you're bringing home genes that are going to deliver you 68%, And so you can be the best manager in the world. These ewes went to the ram at condition score 2.9, so we weren't hurting them. They were in almost industry optimum. And some of those sires, or the daughters of a sire, delivered many fewer lambs than others. So I think massive opportunity to make sure that the genes you're bringing home are going to be the ones up the top of that graph rather than down the bottom. And we're not running blind in this case. Number of lambs wean breeding value, it is the sketchiest of the breeding values, I'll be honest, but getting better as we go. But this is, in this graph, we've got the number of lambs wean breeding value for the sire before that data went in, and then the reproductive. So for the sires that had a bit of data in the database before we ran the progeny test, they had a predicted number of lambs weaned. We then correlate that with the scanning percentage of their daughters, and we see a pretty nice correlation, which, to be honest, amazed the hell out of me. But it's great to see, and really does show that with the tools that we have available to us as an industry can actually deliver. We can bring genes into our enterprise to do a job because we've got tools to do it. Another increase in per hectare production across all breed types is obviously growth and weight, and this is weight of progeny at 12 months of age. And you can play that game two ways. You either got lambs going to heavier carcass weights, or you're finishing them at an earlier age, and both of those two things deliver you money, either through reducing cost or increasing profit. And again, there's a 10 kilo range there across sire groups. So the only thing different about those animals is the fact that they had a different sire. Everything else is the same. So a massive opportunity in genetics, and one that can be found or can be sought through chasing a yearling weight breeding value. So that's something that could be going into your breeding objective if getting that high weight turn-off is important. And in that production system, when we killed those wether lambs of this system, that was a $30 difference from the best and worst sire group in those progeny sets. Exactly the same opportunity. The only thing we did different was the set of genes that we rolled across those ewes. So a big opportunity to deliver profit and reduce cost. For more of a wool-focused one, so clean fleece weight, this is about a half a kilo difference. I won't dwell on this. I'll move through some of these quickly, but half a kilo difference of clean wool, best and worst sire group, and again can be predicted through buying rams with a positive clean fleece weight breeding value. So big opportunity there across. And I guess as you've seen these breeds sort of pop up, what it's showing is it doesn't really matter what you're running. There's genetic variation in merinos, in corridors, in quarterbreds. In whatever sheep you're running, there's genetic variation there, and it's not an argument about which breed's better than which, because the gap within a breed is as wide as it is between breeds, and same with between breeders and within that breeder. There's a heap of opportunity to stick with exactly the sheep type you want if that's good for you, but find the genes that are going to drive profit and do the best job they can. So they're the sort of what I thought of as some sort of per hectare production type traits, and there'll be others depending on your production system that are more important to you, but there's some examples of what you can put in and the range that's out there to capture. Labour use efficiency, I think, is sort of asleep, and it doesn't often rank very highly in when we ask people what they want to improve in their sheep most. Often people go for the things that I've just covered, so it's all about the outputs. But increasingly, and as we think about that consumer set that don't like chemicals that much, they don't like negative welfare practices that much, there's a whole heap of things that they don't like. We need to be thinking about how we can take labour out of, how we can make our sheep less labour use intensive. And worm egg count breeding value is a great one of that, and there's certainly in some parts of the industry you can't sell a ram without a good yearling weight, without a good worm egg count breeding value, because particularly where Barber's Pole exists, because they know the impact that breeding value can have on the ability to run those sheep and the ability to run them without worms. And breech wrinkle breeding value. So in our database, the 80 sires that we've progeny tested, massive opportunity there in worm egg count breeding value. So some sheep that are naturally wormy all the time, some sheep which require less drenching and are less wormy, and equally across breech wrinkle, which is one of the indicator traits for fly strike, about a 2.5 wrinkle score difference on a 5 wrinkle score scale between the best and worst, or highest and lowest wrinkled animals. So big opportunity in those particular traits. One thing we've focused a hell of a lot on in New Zealand, and the whole reason they shipped me over there really was to chase foot rot, and because feet health is a massive issue in New Zealand, and I don't think we're immune to it here. There's obviously foot rot's a communicable disease here, so something that's different, but in terms of feet health, there's a lot of sheep that lameness is an issue for. So we've been doing a lot of work on the genetics of foot rot, and nicely, it's about 25% heritable. So 20 to 25% of the variation between individuals, it can be explained by their genetics, which is a great place to be. And so we've been doing a lot of work trying to find out which sires are more resistant. So on this graph on the far left is, so if we score every foot on a 1 to 5 scale, and then we average them, it's a great job, I promise you. So out on the left of that graph, you've got the resistant animals, and on the right of that graph, you've got the susceptible animals across a couple of drops. We turned that data into breeding values, or the Agbu crowd did for us. But what it demonstrates is there's a massive opportunity in feet health and in the foot rot resistance, which is a really great outcome for us. And so there's a couple of dots on the bottom, of the red dot at the bottom and a blue dot at the bottom. They're actually from flocks that have been selecting negatively for or against foot rot for 30 years and have made massive gains. And those sheep, I promise you, are 100% bomb-proof to foot rot. I've had them running in conditions conducive to foot rot with other sheep with foot rot for a year, and they don't get foot rot. It is amazing, and so really demonstrates the power of genes to change our labour use and change the way we have to run sheep, because sheep just don't get the disease. Anyone excited yet? A couple of people, that's good. Reducing cost of production is obviously important for our systems, and condition score is something that you'll be all well and truly aware of, something that lifetime ewe management has really been a great thing for the industry and achieve really good things in terms of awareness of where sheep need to be functioning. Fit and healthy sheep, not fat and unproductive, just sheep in the right zone to make you money and to have good welfare outcomes as well. And so it's been a great thing, and we do think about how often we have to pull out that barley trailer, or how often we have to get our feed, our pasture available right to get that condition score right. But also, getting your genes right to achieve that condition score outcome is really important. So this is that same group of sheep. We've given a fair flogging by now. So these sheep use this as their condition score at mating. So they've, whatever they are, 17 months of age, been running in the same mob their entire life, and we've got a 0.8 condition score difference between the worst and the best and worst sire group. So again, nothing else different other than the sire, the bag of genes we decided to roll out, and yet there's a 0.8 condition score difference. And I don't need to tell you what that means in terms of how to manage those sheep and their likely productivity, their likely performance, and how you get on as managers, and the cost that it takes to run that sheep. And the beautiful thing is that we have a tool to find that sheep. We're not just running blind. We've got a tool that can actually find those bag of genes and bring into our flocks. And that's one of them is the yearling fat breeding value. And if you've ever heard me be mediocre before, you would have heard me talk about genetic fat, because I'm quite passionate about it. But this, I think, is the sole reason that it's important in a production system, that you can find sheep genetics that have a positive genetic fat breeding value. You can bring them into your system, and you can deliver daughters, sheep daughters that is, that are genetically fatter going through the year. The other attribute that's very well correlated with that same condition score is yearling eye muscle depth, and I think those two things are intimately combined and never should be separated. Very important. But again, if you go for positive muscle, positive fat, you get better condition score, and that makes sense, because when you're condition scoring an animal, you got your hand right on the spot that the scanner comes and scans those sheep when he's actually measuring muscle and fat breeding value. So it's not rocket science that it would work, but it's beautiful to see that it does. So it wouldn't be right for me to give a presentation without being a little bit controversial. So I think allowing transparency isn't something that's going away, and we need to get focused on it. By the end of the year in New Zealand, it'll be a $5,000 fine to mules and a criminal conviction. And so that's the message that New Zealand wants to send to the world. We didn't. It wasn't something driven by New Zealand Merino. It was something driven by the government and other bodies. It wasn't. We have had in our supply chain ZQ for a long time, which, because we had a set of consumers that didn't want to have a mules product, and so we've had that as part of our supply chain for a long time, but we haven't pushed for this ban. But it is something that's happening, and so we need to think about that in terms of, are we building things in our production system that will stand the test of time? Because genetics is not a silver bullet. It's not a quick tool. It takes time to change sheep, and we need to really really be thinking about, are we doing the things that we know we'll still be able to do in 20 years' time? And I think the other one that allows transparency, are we selecting for traits that end up with pictures like that one on the left? Because that's not going to stand the test of time either. And that's not a picture from Australia, I'm happy to say, that's one from New Zealand. But we have to be really, really honest with ourselves about, do we think selecting for things, breeding a sheep that's unbalanced, so putting a lot of wool on a sheep without much fat and muscle, we know that that's not a positive outcome for lamb survival. So are we doing that, and do we think we can stand the test of time with that animal? And similarly, are we selecting a heap of number lambs weaned and not building enough around that sheep to actually deliver those lambs into the marking cradle or to be able to make money of them? So really things to just put out there to think about, that we need to make sure everything we're doing we'll still be able to do in 20 years' time. And the last one on my list was attributes with value that can't be captured. And I think the reason it's number 6 on that list is because if you can't capture the value in your production system, it's of no value to you. And if you're putting genetic pressure on, you're putting some selection pressure on that trait, and you're not getting value in your pocket through your value chain, then you're wasting an opportunity to put more pressure on something else, in my mind. Not saying that the consumers don't love eating quality and omega-3s and all these great things that we could put into our meat product, but we need to build supply chains that deliver that back to producers to make and to be able to put that into your production system, and to be able to give up some genetic gain to put that into your selection potential. So getting to a close now, and I was sitting down on Sunday night with a guy from Western Victoria actually, and he rightly said that is there a more complex job than farming? Like the different things that you have to do as a farmer from day to day, like fixing a pump to bleeding a tractor to deciding which genes you're going to bring home, to deciding which chemical you're going to put on those crops or whatever. There's a lot of complex decisions that have to happen every day, and so it is a complex job. And gene hunting, so the job of bringing genes in your system is infrequent. You do it once or twice a year, and it's not simple. Like, it's easy for me to sit up here and talk about all these traits because that's all I do. But for you guys, you've got other things, lots of other things to do. So we need to have, in our businesses, have really good practices to make sure we don't stuff up this really important job because it's infrequent and complex. Because the risk is, jobs like that, and I know what I'm like, if it's something I don't do very often and it's a bit hard, I either put it off or I don't do it that well because I just can't be stuffed getting it right. Whereas gene hunting is too important to be one of those things. So we need some systems in place to make sure, to give us the best chance of not doing that. And so go through your business, work out what are you producing, exactly be clear about what your consumer set is and what you want to be doing in 20 years' time. And think about it in the context of A, what they want, B, what they'll allow you to do. I think that's important. And then hone in on with what you want to do, with what you think the consumers will want to do, hone in and find the traits that you think are linked to your own prosperity. What are the traits, 4 or 5 traits that are most likely going to deliver you the prosperity that you desire? And I think it's important to limit it to that number, not too many, because the more you put into your selection pressure, or the more you put into your breeding objective, the harder it gets to achieve. And then sit down, write down the annual plan for that genome. What is it you're going to do? What are your cut-offs for the traits? What are the attributes I'm looking for in that ram? And then share it with someone that's likely to hold you to it. Probably the wife for the blokes in the room, or the accountant, or for someone that you know that's actually going to hold you to that job, because it's easy for that to disappear the day after you write it down. But I think it is an important process and an important part of our enterprises. So what we'd love is basically that you're down to your 5 or 6 traits, and then you're just dialing them up. Breeding sheep's easy, just up and down on those dials and job done. And I know it's not that simple, and I know you've got to put so it's not just about the breeding values. I've been talking about the numbers all day, but I am very aware that it's about balance and it's about getting the right type of sheep, and there's lots of things that you can see with your eyes and feel with your hands that are important. But having the cut-offs right and the traits right, so getting the traits focused on and then the cut-offs right, I think is a really, really important process. That's it for me. All our work that we do is on www.perfectsheep.co.nz, so all that CPT results are on there, and a lot of the different stuff that we do, and by all means get on there and have a look. We've got Trompy on video there if you want to watch that. But that's it. Thank you.